Imagine being at your engagement party, surrounded by love, when your mother hands you a drink. What if one small decision saved your life? It wasn't just a mistake. Hey everyone, I'm Lily, and today I want to share with you a part of my life that I never thought I would have to go through. A life controlled and manipulated by the very person I loved most. My mother. You might think that my story is just about normal family dynamics, but the truth is far from simple. My mother, Vivienne, has been pulling the strings in my life since I was a child, and I didn't realize it until it was almost too late. But it's never too late to reclaim control. I hope you'll stick around for the full story, and if you find it meaningful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It'll motivate me to keep sharing more stories with you. It was my engagement party. I had imagined it would be a perfect day, a memorable one for me and Sam, but the truth was different. I stood there, surrounded by family and friends, but I didn't feel the joy I was expecting. Everything about the party was perfect, too perfect, in fact. Vivienne, my mother, had insisted on planning every single detail. From the venue to the guest list, she had orchestrated it all. The lights, the music, even the food choices were selected to present an image of the perfect family. But I had learned long ago that perfection was Vivienne's currency, and I was the price. Sam, my fiancé, smiled at me from across the room, his warm gaze almost enough to distract me from the tension building inside me. I was happy to marry him, of course, but tonight, something felt wrong. Vivienne had already criticized the dress I picked, insisting on just one more change. She had also vetoed nearly every guest I wanted to invite, leaving only a few of her relatives and Sam's colleagues. None of my closest friends were there. I took a deep breath as Vivienne approached me, handing me a glass of wine. "For the bride-to-be," she said, her smile feeling more like a command than a warm gesture. As I took the glass, a strange smell hit my nose. It wasn't sour, but it had a faint medicinal quality, like something had been added to it. Before I could voice any concerns, my younger sister, Mira, slipped beside me, grinning, having just shared a joke with someone at her table. "Cheers, future Mrs. O'Neill," Mira said, reaching for the glass. Without thinking, I swapped glasses with her, trying to make light of the situation with a playful smile. "Ladies first," I said. Mira rolled her eyes and took a sip, laughing. It wasn't until 30 minutes later that everything fell apart. Mira collapsed. The panic that erupted around us was a blur. Chairs scraping, voices rising, and confusion spreading as the night spiraled out of control. I stood frozen, my heart clenched as people rushed to Myra's side. Sam was already calling 911, his face pale, and Vivienne? She was acting as if it was all just a minor inconvenience. "She probably drank too fast," Vivienne said with that same tight smile. "Or maybe she didn't eat enough." But in my mind, everything had changed. It wasn't just the wine. It wasn't just the party. Something about Vivienne's calm reaction felt wrong. I started to put the pieces together. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, fake reassurances, and the weight of something dark settling into my gut. Mira recovered physically, but the tension that remained in the air was suffocating. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a coincidence. Couldn't be. Myra's collapse, the way she'd seemed fine one moment and then nothing, made me feel like I was walking through a fog, every step uncertain. Vivienne, ever the picture of calm, assured me it was just a minor thing, a passing issue, something that could happen to anyone. But something in her eyes told me otherwise. I started looking back at things, trying to make sense of it all. There had always been small moments I had brushed off as just the way Vivienne was. She was protective. She cared. At least, that's what I'd always believed. But as I sat in the quiet of my room, the hospital visits behind me, and the weight of everything pressing down, I realized how wrong I had been to dismiss those moments. Vivienne's protective nature had never been about care. It was about control. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old messages. It was the weekend before the engagement party when Tess, my best friend, texted me to let me know she wouldn't be able to attend. "I know you're overwhelmed, and I don't want to add to it," she'd written. The words were kind, considerate even, but they felt off. Tess was my best friend, the person who had been there through thick and thin. She had been my shoulder to cry on, my confidant, my partner in crime for years. So why would she suddenly pull away like that? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Why would Tess, who knew how important this party was to me, suddenly distance herself? Why, when I needed her the most, would she decide to sit this one out? Vivienne had been quick to claim that Tess had a lot going on, that she was too busy, and didn't want to add to my stress. The words had sounded rehearsed, as if Vivienne herself were trying to smooth over something that wasn't quite right. Felt like Tess was being excluded. The way Vivienne talked about Tess made me feel like she was deliberately keeping her away from me. The more I thought about it, the more my suspicions grew. I started to remember how Vivienne had always been critical of my relationships, of my friends, of my boyfriends. Nothing and no one was ever good enough for her. She would subtly undermine my decisions, playing the role of the concerned mother, but in reality, she was orchestrating everything around me. Anytime I got close to someone, Vivienne would find some flaw, some reason to keep them at arm's length. I had seen it with Ben, my first serious boyfriend. Vivienne had found ways to tear him apart in my mind, making me question if I was really in love or if I was just too blinded to see the flaws that she was so quick to point out. Ben wasn't perfect, sure, but he wasn't the monster Vivienne had made him out to be. But I didn't realize that until much later. By the time I figured it out, he was gone, and Vivienne had already won. It wasn't just Ben. There had been other friends too: Sarah, my college roommate; Jordan, the guy I'd met at work; Ella, my childhood friend who lived a few streets away. Vivienne didn't like them, so she found a way to make sure they were no longer part of my life. She would subtly plant seeds of doubt. "Do you really think Sarah has your best interests at heart?" she'd ask. Or, "I think Jordan might be using you for something." It always seemed to come from a place of care, of concern, but what I couldn't see at the time was that it was all just manipulation. Isolation was her strategy, and I had been blind to it for so long. I remembered the time when I had asked Vivienne if I could invite Tess to the engagement party. Tess and I had been inseparable for so many years, but for some reason, Vivienne didn't like her as much anymore. "She's too much of a distraction," Vivienne had said, her tone sharp and dismissive. "You need to focus on your fiancée, Lily, not your friends." I had been young and naive, so I hadn't thought much of it at the time. But now everything was coming together. The patterns were so obvious now, and the dots were finally connecting. The isolation didn't stop with just my friends and boyfriends. Vivienne's reach extended into my career too. She had manipulated my work relationships, always finding ways to make my colleagues question my abilities, making them believe I wasn't as competent as I seemed. And when I got a promotion, Vivienne had convinced me to turn it down, claiming it wasn't the right time and that I wasn't ready for the responsibility. I should have known better, but her words always felt like the gospel. Her judgment, her advice always felt like the right thing to do. At least that's how she made me feel. The more I thought about it, the more confused and angry I became. How had I been so blind? How had I let Vivienne dictate my life for so long? She hadn't just hurt me that night at the party. She had been hurting me for years. She had been weaving this web of control around me since I was young, and I had only just realized it. Every decision I had made, every friendship I'd lost, every relationship that had fallen apart, even the career choices I had made, had been shaped by her in ways I had never understood. I could no longer ignore it. The truth was staring me in the face. Vivienne had been controlling every aspect of my life under the guise of love and concern. It was time for me to stop being blind, stop being her pawn. I had to start taking control of my own life, and that meant breaking free from her grasp, once and for all. I reached my breaking point. I couldn't stay silent any longer. The pressure of hiding my truth, of pretending that everything was fine, had built up to a point where I could no longer breathe without feeling suffocated. Vivienne had woven her web of lies and control around me for far too long, and I could feel the weight of it pressing on my chest every day. I had given her so much of my life, my happiness, my confidence, but I couldn't give her another second. The decision to confront her wasn't easy. I had spent years tiptoeing around the truth, living under her shadow, scared to shake the foundation she had so carefully built. But now I knew I had to face it head-on. So I made the call. I arranged a family dinner, something normal, something that would create the illusion of calm. But I knew this dinner would be anything but ordinary. I invited not only my immediate family but a few trusted friends, people who could see through the perfect facade Vivienne had built. People who knew her well enough to understand what was happening even if they hadn't seen the full extent of it. Tess, my best friend, who had always been there when I needed her. Mira, my sister, who had lived through so much of Vivienne's control herself, even if she hadn't fully recognized it. They were the ones who could help me navigate this confrontation to witness the truth I was about to unleash. The night began like any other family gathering. Vivienne had put on her best smile, the one that could convince anyone that everything was just as it should be. She asked about my job, my life, her usual questions, but all I could think about was how carefully she had constructed this perfect illusion, the one where she was the loving, supportive mother, the one who was always there for me. It was suffocating, this act she had perfected, this pretense of care. As the evening went on, I could feel the tension building inside me. It wasn't just the anxiety of what I was about to do, it was years of emotions being pushed down, years of fear and resentment finally coming to the surface. I kept my face neutral, calm even, but my heart was racing. I couldn't delay it any longer. It was time. I waited until dessert was served, the clinking of spoons against plates filling the room. I looked around the table at the faces I had known my whole life, family, friends, and then I turned to Vivienne. For a moment, I almost felt the guilt rising up inside me, the guilt that she had trained me to feel whenever I would challenge her. But I silenced it. It was time to take control. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but betraying the years of suppressed emotion that I had kept bottled up. The room fell silent immediately. Even Vivienne seemed to freeze for a moment. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. She didn't move. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking slightly as I found the video footage from the engagement party. I had kept it hidden on my phone, unsure of when the right moment would be. But now there was no going back. I couldn't keep pretending any longer. Vivienne's actions had to be exposed. "Look at this," I said, my voice growing more determined with every word. I pressed play and the footage flickered on the screen. Vivienne was standing near the table holding the glass of wine. The camera caught her clearly as she tampered with it. She took something from her purse, a small vial, and poured it into the glass before handing it to me with a smile that made my stomach turn. The room went still. I could see Vivienne's eyes darting around, looking for an escape, trying to think of something to say. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook. "This isn't just an accident," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and determination. "This was deliberate. You tried to poison me." Vivienne's face went pale. Her eyes widened in shock, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "No," I said firmly. "I understand more than you think. I've been living under your control for far too long." She opened her mouth again, but her words faltered. "You don't understand," she began, her voice quivering slightly, but I could tell it was more out of fear than anything else. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't going to let her twist this, not this time. "No, you're wrong," I said, standing up from the table and looking around at the family members who were now watching the scene unfold. "I understand perfectly. This isn't just about what happened tonight. This is about years of manipulation, lies, and deceit." I felt a rush of emotions as I finally let everything out, things that had been buried inside me for far too long. Years of thinking I wasn't good enough. Years of believing that her judgment was the only one that mattered. But now I was done. Done being manipulated. "This has been going on for years, Vivienne. You've controlled everything in my life. My friends, my relationships, my career, everything. You never let me think for myself. And you sure as hell never let me be happy without you being at the center of it. But not anymore. Not after what I saw on that video. Not after everything I've uncovered." Vivienne was silent now, her face a mixture of anger and guilt. I could see the rage building in her. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up her wine glass, but she didn't drink from it. It was like she was trying to hold herself together, but I could see through it. The mask was slipping. "You don't know what you're talking about," she spat out, her voice low and trembling with barely contained fury. "I did everything for you. For your own good. You think I wanted this? I wanted you to have everything, to be successful, to be happy." Her words were sharp, trying to make me feel like I was the one who was in the wrong, the one who couldn't see the sacrifices she had made. But I was done with her playing the victim. "No," I interrupted, voice breaking with the weight of everything. "You didn't want me to be happy. You wanted to control me. You wanted to make sure that I never lived a life that didn't revolve around you. I've been chasing your approval my whole life. And now I realize I never needed it." I turned to the rest of the family, my voice firm and unwavering. This isn't just about tonight, I continued, taking a deep breath to steady myself. This is about every single moment where you made me doubt myself. Every time you told me I wasn't good enough. Every time you told me what to do with my life. And every time you pushed people away just to keep me in your control. The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone was staring at me and I could feel their eyes on Vivienne, waiting for her to react. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. I had done it. I had finally exposed the truth. Vivienne sat there, her hands gripping the edge of her seat, her face pale and rigid. She didn't know what to say. But for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. For the first time, I felt like I had taken control back. The fallout from the confrontation was more than I had anticipated. The air felt different, like I had been living in a fog for so long, and now, finally, the clouds had parted. Vivienne, who had always been the center of attention, the one everyone looked to for guidance and approval, now found herself in social isolation. People began to see her for who she really was, the manipulative, controlling force she had spent years hiding behind a perfect mask. That mask had cracked, and for the first time, I felt free. The weight of her control was lifted, and I could finally breathe again. It wasn't just the tension from the dinner that had dissipated, it was the years of emotional manipulation that had been buried deep inside me. For so long, I had been under her thumb, unsure of myself, questioning my every decision, always wondering if I was enough. Now, with the truth finally out, I was starting to feel like I could finally live my own life, not one dictated by her expectations, her plans for me. Sam stood by me through it all, his unwavering support a comfort in the midst of everything. He had been a rock, a constant source of strength when everything around me seemed to be crumbling. And so had Tess and Mira, people who had always been there, but whose roles had been diminished by Vivienne's need to control every aspect of my life. But now they were here with me, helping me rebuild, encouraging me to step into the future that was waiting for me. The family was still healing, and there were moments of tension, moments where the silence between us felt heavy. But for me, it felt like a new chapter. Sam and I decided to have a small, intimate wedding. It wasn't the grand celebration Vivienne would have insisted upon. It wasn't a show or a spectacle meant to impress others, to make everything appear perfect. It was going to be real. It was going to be authentic. I didn't want the kind of love that had been manipulated by Vivienne's standards. I didn't want to walk down the aisle knowing that I was just living out someone else's idea of what my life should be. I wanted to marry Sam in a way that reflected who we were, not who Vivienne wanted us to be. A celebration of love without manipulation, surrounded by the people who genuinely supported us, people who saw us for who we truly were, not the roles that Vivienne had scripted for us. The wedding planning wasn't easy. The pressure from my family, especially Vivienne, still lingered. There were moments when I wanted to just give in, to let her have a say, to make her happy. But I couldn't. I couldn't keep living a life where my choices weren't my own. I had spent so many years trying to please her, trying to meet her expectations. But in the end, I realized that freedom wasn't just about escaping from Vivienne, it was about rediscovering myself, about finding the woman I had lost in the shadow of her control. I had to remind myself constantly that this was my life, my choice. Sam was my partner in this journey, not just in marriage, but in the process of rebuilding everything I had once thought was impossible. Our wedding wasn't just about saying vows in front of family and friends, it was about choosing each other over all the manipulation, all the lies, and all the hurt that had come before. As we stood together in front of our closest friends and family, there was a moment when I looked at Sam, truly looked at him. It wasn't just about love, it was about trust. Sam had been the one person who had never tried to control me, never tried to change me. He had always accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. That's the love I had been searching for, not one that fits someone else's expectations, but one that was built on mutual respect, understanding, and freedom. When I walked down the aisle with Sam by my side, I wasn't just stepping into a new chapter of my life. I was stepping into the truth. The truth about who I was, who I had become, and who I wanted to be. The weight of Vivienne's control had kept me from seeing myself clearly, but now I saw everything with fresh eyes. The ceremony was simple, but it was powerful. As we exchanged vows, there were no pretenses, no false promises. It was a quiet, intimate moment of commitment, not just to each other, but to the truth we had finally found together. No more manipulation. No more lies. Just truth. After the wedding, when we walked out of the venue, it felt like the first time in a long while that I was truly walking in the light. No more secrets, no more lies, no more trying to please someone who didn't know how to love me for who I was. Vivienne was still a part of my life, but she no longer had the power to define it. She couldn't hold me back anymore. I had found my voice, my strength, and most importantly, I had found myself. In the days that followed, as Sam and I settled into our new life together, I realized that the journey I had taken wasn't just about confronting Vivienne, it was about reclaiming my own power. I had spent too many years in the shadow of her expectations, trying to live up to a life that wasn't mine. But now I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of, the life I had always been meant to live. The path forward wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments where I would be tempted to fall back into old patterns, to give in to Vivienne's control. But I knew that I could never go back to that place. I had walked away from the lies, from the manipulation, and into a future where I could finally breathe, finally live. And so, with Sam by my side, I walked forward into that future. A future where I was no longer a puppet, no longer bound by anyone's expectations but my own. A future built on truth and freedom. The truth about who I was and the freedom to become everything I was meant to be. In the end, I had discovered that freedom wasn't just about escaping from Vivienne. It was about rediscovering myself, finding the woman I had lost in the shadow of her control. And as I walked down that aisle with Sam by my side, I knew that this was the beginning of something real, something authentic. No more manipulation. No more lies. Just truth. Just freedom. What do you think about the journey Lily has taken to break free from her past and rebuild her life? I'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, or even your own experiences with finding freedom from toxic influences. Drop a comment below to share your feelings, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. There's so much more to come, and I can't wait to share the next chapter with you. Thank you for being a part of this journey and for listening to Lily's story until the very end. Until next time, stay strong and remember, you're always in control of your own path.